In 1982, a northern BC mining town was abandoned so fast that residents left food in their fridges, clothes in their closets, and the power on. And then, nobody came back. In 1927, an entire Quebec village shut down in a single day. Every building left standing exactly as it was. And somewhere in Nunavut, a trapper walked into an Inuit village in 1930 and found the fires cold, the food untouched, and 58 people just gone. These are 10 abandoned towns in Canada where nobody fully knows what happened. Starting off with one that's literally hiding inside one of Canada's most beautiful national parks, Bankhead, Alberta. It sat right inside of what is now Banff National Park, and at its peak, nearly 1,000 people lived there. It had electricity and running sewers before the town of Banff did, which is kind of wild when you really think about it. It was a coal town operated by the Canadian Pacific Railway starting in 1903, and in 1922, CPR decided it wasn't worth it anymore and shut the whole thing down. But here's the thing. They didn't just leave. They systematically demolished most of the town, moved buildings, relocated some residents, gave others basically nothing. What you're left with today is an eerie skeleton of stone foundations and rusted machinery inside a national park that millions of tourists walk through every year, mostly without knowing any of this is there. Why go through the trouble of erasing a whole town rather than just walking away from it? Well, nobody gives a fully satisfying answer on that one. Val-Jalbert in Quebec is probably the best preserved ghost town in all of Canada. Over 70 original buildings still standing. Homes, the general store, a convent school, frozen exactly as it was in 1927. The town existed purely to support a single pulp mill at the base of Saskatchewan Falls. When the mill shut down, the company gave residents almost no notice and basically said, "You gotta go." And I mean, they went, but they left everything behind. Not because something super dramatic happened, but because there was simply nowhere to bring it. A whole community evaporated in a single day. The mill closed, the jobs disappeared, and somehow none of it ever got cleared out. 70 buildings untouched for nearly a century. What do you all think of this one? Tragedy, or just what happens when your entire town belongs to one company? In the 1890s, Sandon was basically like the Las Vegas of the Canadian Rockies. I really mean that. At its peak, 5,000 people lived there, 32 hotels, 23 saloons, and working electric streetlights in 1897. That's pretty remarkable for a mountain town carved into a narrow BC valley. It was all built on silver, but when the silver started drying up, people slowly drifted out. But Sandon did not fade away quietly. In 1955, a massive flash flood tore through the valley and demolished most of what was left. Buildings that had survived 30 years of decline got wiped out in hours. There were still people living there when it hit. They just had to walk away from whatever remained. A boom city of 5,000 reduced to a few ruins and a small museum. And the kicker is, those final residents didn't leave because the town failed. They left because the land itself finished it off. Michel-Natal was a coal mining community in BC's Crow's Nest Pass that had been running since the early 1900s. Real, functioning town, thousands of people, schools, churches, everything you'd expect. And then the government and the mining company made a call. Decades of coal dust contamination had baked into the soil and the buildings so thoroughly that rather than clean it up, they decided it was just easier to erase the town. Residents were told to leave. Buildings were demolished one by one. The community got absorbed into the newer nearby town of Sparwood. People who'd lived their entire lives there watched their homes come down. Drive through that area today, and there's almost nothing to indicate a town ever existed. No ruins, no real memorial, just absence. That's a pretty strange kind of haunting, I think. Most ghost towns leave something. This one was just deliberately made to leave nothing. Alright, for this one we are traveling to my home province, and this one is genuinely kind of bizarre. Cannington Manor in Saskatchewan wasn't a mining town or a mill town, it was a colony, founded in 1882 by a wealthy English gentleman named Captain Edward Pierce, who basically wanted to recreate aristocratic English life on the Canadian prairies. And for about 20 years, it kinda worked. Tennis courts, a racetrack, a billiard room. The settlers, all English upper-class types, were more interested in fox hunting and cricket than actual farming. But then, the railway came through and it bypassed Cannington Manor completely. Without rail access, the whole economic premise collapsed. By 1900, it was basically empty. This weird little English utopia in the middle of Saskatchewan just quietly folded. The question of why anyone thought it was going to work is, honestly kind of unanswerable, especially if you've ever been to Saskatchewan. But it existed, and then it didn't. Anyox is considered the largest ghost town in Canada, and it's not particularly close. At its peak in the 1920s, over 2,000 people lived there, working a massive copper mine and smelter on BC's northern coast. The company built the whole town from scratch. Hospital, school, movie theater, everything. In 1935, the mine closed, and unlike towns that empty out slowly, this one went fast. Within months, it was basically abandoned. Then a fire tore through what remained, and the forest started reclaiming the rest. You can only reach it by boat today, and what you find is this overgrown, collapsed skeleton of a place that 2,000 people once called home. The remoteness adds something, for sure. Most of what's there has never been fully documented, and whatever happened after the last person left, well, nobody was around to record it. Pine Point in the Northwest Territories is strange because the unsettling part isn't just that people left, it's that the evidence they ever existed was deliberately removed. In 1988, the lead and zinc mine closed, and instead of leaving the town standing, the company demolished everything. Over 1,200 people had lived in Pine Point for 25 years. Houses, a recreation center, the full infrastructure of a real Canadian community flattened. There's a small memorial now and a few street signs that lead to empty lots, but if you ever visited, you genuinely struggle to believe a town of over 1,000 people ever existed there. Former residents are still angry about it, and of course, I get that. You can grieve a place even when it wasn't lost to anything mysterious. Sometimes it's just a corporate decision made over your head that you had zero say in. That's its own kind of haunting, to be fair. Uranium City in northern Saskatchewan technically still has a handful of residents, but what happened to it in 1982 is pretty staggering. At its peak, around 5,000 people lived there, drawn by uranium mining during the Cold War, when uranium was basically the most valuable thing on Earth. Then, the mines closed and the evacuation was almost overnight. The provincial government actually airlifted people out. 5,000 people became a few hundred in just months. Buildings were just left, streets emptied, infrastructure started decaying. What's there now is this half-standing, half-demolished reminder of a Cold War economic bubble that just popped. And a lot of the people who left say they still don't fully understand why it happened so fast. The decisions were made above them. They just got told to go, and they went. Kitsault might be the most unsettling entry on this list, and it technically has a known explanation, which somehow makes it weirder. In 1979, a mining company built an entire town from scratch in a remote BC inlet near the Alaska border. Modern houses, a rec center, a pub, a shopping mall, everything. By 1982, the price of molybdenum, that's the mineral that they were mining, crashed. The company pulled out in weeks, and everything got left behind. Furniture in the houses, dishes in the cupboards, the power stayed on for over 20 years. You could walk into Kitsault and it looked like everyone had just stepped out for an afternoon and then never came back. A billionaire bought the whole town in 2005, which is a whole other story, but for those 20 plus years before that, a perfectly preserved 1982 time capsule sitting completely empty in the BC BC wilderness. Nobody looted it, nobody vandalized it, it just waited. I don't know, that's kind of nuts to me. And finally, there is this one. The one that I genuinely don't really have a clean explanation for, and neither, apparently, does anybody else. In November of 1930, a fur trapper named Joe LaBelle was traveling through what is now Nunavut, near Anjikuni Lake. He came across an Inuit village he'd visited before, a community of around 58 people, and it was completely empty. Not just quiet, empty. The fires were cold, pots of food were sitting on stoves, mid-cook, rifles, which these people needed to survive, were left leaning against walls, the sled dogs were tied up outside and had starved to death, that's a horrible thing, and a nearby grave had apparently been disturbed. Skeptics argue that parts of this story were exaggerated or fabricated by the newspaper reporters who first published it, and they make some decent points. Nothing officially confirmed, and the original account has inconsistencies, but even the conservative versions of events is strange. Something caused 58 people to abandon a functioning village, leave their food, leave their rifles, leave their dogs, and just disappear. They were never definitively accounted for. Could be faked, could be inflated, but it is a damn strange story either way. Something happened there, and to this day, the official record is basically just, I don't know. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!